Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the high-level launch of the project Environmental Economic Accounting for Evidence-Based Policy in the Philippines. I'm Ncaa, your host for this event. To formally kick off and welcome us all in this launch, let us welcome the National Statistician and Civil Registrar General of the Philippine Statistics Authority, Dr. Dennis Mapa.
Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Cara Ncaa, represented here today by Undersecretary Mercy Sumbilia of the National Economic Development Authority. Good morning, Yusik Mercy. United Nations Resident Coordinator in the Philippines, Gustavo Gonzalez. United Nations Statistics Division Chief for Environmental Economic Accounts Section, Alessandra Alferi. UNSC Statistics Division Director, Gemma Van Halderen. Department of Environment and Natural Resources Undersecretary for Policy, Planning, and International Affairs, USEC Jonas Leones. Environment and Economic Center for Studies, Chair and President, Dr. Jem Castillo. Of course, our resource person, my colleague from the University of the Philippines, former national statistician, Dr. Lisa Grace Persales. Good morning. Government officials, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all of you. This event officially launches the collaborative project of the Philippine Statistics Authority and the United Nations Statistics Division, the Environmental Economic Accounting for Evidence-Based Policy in Africa and Asia. This project aims to strengthen the institutional and technical capacity of national statistical offices to produce system of environmental economic accounts and to strengthen national capacity of project countries to use environmental economic accounts for monitoring sustainable development. The Philippines is one of the project countries for this undertaking. The United Nations Statistics Division will work with the PSA and relevant partners to carry out all project activities. The project activities will focus on very important items. First, building the institutional framework in support of Seiya implementation, taking into consideration policy priorities and existing initiatives and activities. Second, building capacities to compile selected accounts on a regular basis. Third, fostering inter-institutional relationship to promote collaboration and data sharing in producing the accounts. And finally, promoting the effective communication and use of the accounts for evidence-based policies and the Sustainable Development Goals. Through these events, experts and professionals can share their knowledge, insights, and experiences in the field of environmental economic accounting. This also serves as a venue for government and the private sectors, the academe and civil society to gain more information for the formulation of policies, programs, and activities towards sustainable development in the country. Environmental accounting in the Philippines started in 1991 through the Environmental and Natural Resources Accounting Project, or NRAP, of the United States Agency for International Development. This was followed by NRAP project under the United Nations Development Program in 1995. The Environmental and Natural Resources Accounting NRAP2 project focused on the institutionalization of the Philippine Economic, Environmental, and Natural Resources Accounting System. In 2014, the Philippine Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, or the WAVES project, funded by the World Bank, supported the institutionalization of selected modules of the Seiya 2012 and identified two very important major accounts. These are the mineral asset accounts and the mangrove accounts. In line with this, the United Nations Statistics Division's project, the Philippine Statistics Authority, continues to provide quality and relevant economic and environment statistics. The PSA developed environmental economic accounts, such as the Philippines Mineral, Water, and Energy accounts. Also, in line with the 2012 system of environmental economic accounting framework, the PSA used this as a guide to the development of these accounts. With the recent approval of the Seiya Ecosystem Accounting Framework and the support of its partner agencies, the Philippine Statistics Authority can develop more relevant environmental economic accounts. Moreover, the Philippine Statistics Authority already started to develop sub-national environmental economic accounts like the land, timber, mineral, and water accounts in the Cordillera Administrative Region or CAR, Central Luzon, Caraga Region, and Northern Mindanao. On behalf of the Philippine Statistics Authority, we are very grateful to the United Nations Statistics Division for selecting the Philippines as part of its project and for collaborating with us to implement this initiative. It is an honor for us to pave the way for a more capable and inclusive country in terms of environmental economic accounting. It is a pleasure to welcome representatives from various government agencies, private institutions, and other stakeholders, as well as our experts in environmental economic accounting. May this be a productive and informative morning for us as we listen to our key speakers and panelists. Thank you for joining, and may this project launching be a success for all. I wish you all a warm and productive day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, USEC MAPA. Now, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers who have experiences as leaders and experts in economic planning, development activities, international concern, and data integration and analysis. Our first key message speaker is the Undersecretary of the Regional Development Group of the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA. She finished her doctorate degree in agricultural economics at the University of Minnesota, USA, that made her pursue to become a full-time researcher and became affiliated with various international research organizations, including the International Food Policy Research Institute based in Washington, D.C., the International Rice Research Institute, and the Southeast Asian Center for Graduate Studies in Agriculture in Los Baños, Laguna. She also served as a consultant to various development partners like the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, the World Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, Australian Center for International Agricultural Research, the United States Agency for International Development, and to various governments including Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Undersecretary Mercedita Agkawili Sombilia.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole. Philippine Statistics Authority Undersecretary Claire Dennis Mapa, UN Resident Coordinator in the Philippines, Gustavo Gonzalez, UN Statistics Division Chief for Environmental Economics Accounts Section, Alessandra Alferi, UN ESCAP Statistics Division Director Gemma Van Halderen, USEC Leones of the DENR, Doc Liza, colleagues in government, other development partners, and stakeholders, a pleasant morning. On behalf of the National Economic and Development Authority, we congratulate the Philippine Statistics Authority and the United Nations Statistics Division for the launch of their collaborative project, Environmental Economic Accounting for Evidence-Based Policy in the Philippines. This project is a welcome and a timely initiative as we continue to push for the advancement of environmental economic accounting for better informed policy and decision-making by analyzing the interaction between the environment and the economy. The environment and natural resources sector plays a critical role in the country's development, as highlighted in our Philippine Development Plan 2017-2022, chapter on ensuring ecological integrity. Improving environmental health and ensuring ecological integrity are critical to support 1, acceleration of economic growth, 2, strengthening resilience to climate change and disasters, and 3, improvement of the socioeconomic conditions of resource-based communities. Since the environment is important to society and the economy, it should be recognized as an asset that must be maintained and managed. and its contribution should be integrated into commonly used frameworks like the Philippine System of National Accounts. Thus, upscaling natural capital accounting, including valuation of ecosystem services, is included among the priority cross-cutting strategies in the Philippine Development Plan to achieve a healthy and resilient Philippines. As the highest economic planning agency in the country, NEDA recognizes the significance and role of environmental economic accounting in measuring the country's wealth. This is why NEDA formulated the system to account for the use of environment and natural resources, the natural capital accounting. Ncaa measures the changes in the natural capital accounts through time and provides accounting framework to integrate environmental indicators and income accounts. By providing clear and concise numbers for many of the natural resources that we have long taken for granted, the government and its partners through the Ncaa can maximize and measure the benefits of the country's environment and natural resources. Incorporating natural capital into national accounts will support the development of better policies, programs, and economic decisions that emphasize the importance of environment in the economy. In relation to this, the NEDA, in partnership with other government agencies like the Philippine Statistics Authority and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, is working towards the institutionalization of the Ncaa in the country. This is envisioned to put the Philippines one step closer to sustainable development, climate change adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. This PSA UNSD project will further contribute in the advancement of the environment, economic accounting, and the institutionalization of the Ncaa in the country. Again, congratulations on the launch of the Environmental Economic Accounting for Evidence-Based Policy in the Philippines project. May we all stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Sombilia, for an empowering message. Our next key message speaker has extensive managerial and leadership experience in development, humanitarian affairs, and peace building, performing for several United Nations entities across Central America, Africa, and Middle East. He recently worked as the director of the Business Development and Resource Mobilization Division of the Food and Agricultural Organization. He also had prior engagements with the United Nations Development Program as the Sub-Regional Development Coordinator for the Syria-related crisis from 2013 to 2017. Senior Country Director in Yemen from 2011 to 2013, Country Director in Burundi from 2007 to 2011, and Head of the Post-Conflict Unit in the Democratic Republic of Congo from 2003 to 2007. He worked for various organizations like International Organization for Migration, United Nations Office for Project Services, UN Department of Humanitarian Affairs, and Organization of American States for Peace Building and Reconstruction Programs. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome the United Nations Resident Coordinator in the Philippines, Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. And good morning, dear colleagues. Secretary Carl Chua from NEDA, that is today represented by Yusek Mercedita Sombilia, Undersecretary Dennis Mapa from the Philippine Statistics Authority, Director Gemma van Alderen, Head of the Statistics Division of UNSC. So good morning, dear partners and colleagues. Certainly, I'm pleased to be part of the launch of this very strategic project, Environmental Economic Accounting for Evidence-Based Policy in Africa and Asia. And as a UN resident coordinator, of course, I celebrate the fact that the Philippines was selected as one of the project countries. So this is great for all of us. We frequently say that the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, represent in fact the first ever democratically forged agreement on universal development. We also say that the goals were agreed by all UN member states, including the Philippines, but the process of selecting and defining the performance indicator, this was delegated to the global statistic community. So all of you that were part of this very robust and solid community, you have a great, great responsibility. In practical terms, this means that statisticians are defining the meaning of the 2030 agenda targets and will thus be the ones to determine whether the agenda is ultimately pronounced a success, a failure, or something in between. And I believe that the present project is part of this effort to ensure success of the 2030 agenda, and we commend the investment made by the Statistics Division of UNSC in the region. The government's Philippines Development Plan for 2017-2022 has already fully integrated and aligned the SDGs with the PDP goals and objectives. At the same time, the Philippine Development Plan has broadened its measure of the country's wealth beyond gross domestic product, and now takes stock of the country's natural capital consistently with the framework and methodology of the system of national accounts. As we know, most of the COVID-19 Building Back Better plans are heavily focused on economic recovery, such as providing jobs and restoring livelihoods, which is logical, is reasonable. However, recovery should also be green and climate resilient. In this sense, integrated environmental economic accounts will provide useful indication whether the recovery efforts are achieving the desired economic impact, but also show if these are at the expense of or compromising the environment. At the same time, having such accounts will help us to determine whether the push towards low carbon transformation and energy transition is being done in a manner that does not set back economic gains. As you may know, the UN in the Philippines recently updated its cooperation framework with the country, and we call it the Socioeconomic and Peace-Building Framework for the COVID-19 recovery. The environmental economic accounting approach is central to one of the objectives of these frameworks, which is to ensure that economic growth and climate action are harmonized to put communities on a path of resilient, equitable, and sustainable development. We will endeavor to support the Philippines to speed up the reduction of income poverty in the medium term, while putting the country on a path to share and sustain prosperity for all in the long term. And to this end, one of our priority programming will support the integration of a green and climate lens in recovery efforts, including accelerating low carbon transformation. Data to be generated by the system of environmental economic accounting will also help us measure and monitor the impact and result of these programs. Therefore, we embrace the adoption by the Philippines of the SEEA and future collaboration with the Philippine Statistics Authority and the Ncaa to track the achievement of our shared objectives. We all recognize, and I think that was clearly stated at the beginning of this launch, that economic growth and environmental protection can and should go hand in hand, but we need data to show that these two important aspirations are not opposed. We always say that We cannot transform what we cannot measure. And this project is going in such direction. So this project could provide the tool that we need to present compelling evidence of the argument. So I congratulate all of you for this achievement, and I wish you on behalf of the United Nations country team in the Philippines a great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gustavo, for an enlightening message. Our last but not the least key message speaker is the Director of the Statistics Division in the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Prior to joining the United Nations, she was a member of the Australian Bureau of Statistics executive team focusing on data sharing, data integration, and microdata access, and ADS's contribution to the Australian government's Digital Integration Partnership for Australia. In 2017, she was seconded to the Commonwealth Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet to lead preparation of the government's response to the Productivity Commission inquiry to data availability and use. She was also the inaugural co-chair of a UN expert group on the integration of statistical and geospatial information, an elected member of the International Statistics Institute, a member of the International Association of Official Statistics Executive Committee, the regional director of the Statistical Journal of the IAOS, and an advocate for young statisticians. Let us welcome Director Gemma van Helderen.
Thank you very much, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you here today. Absolute pleasure to be with you here today. Dr. Mapa, Chief Statistician, Under Secretary General and Civil Registrar, Dr. Mercy Sumbilla, Under Secretary General from the National Economic Development Authority, and Mr. Gonzalez, the UN Resident Coordinator. In fact, all my friends there at the Philippine Stats Authority, past and present, and our dear colleagues and friends from UNSD, the Stats Division, and across the community, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today at the launch of this very important initiative on environmental economic accounting for evidence-based policymaking. As you've just heard, my name's Gemma van Helderen, and I lead the SCAP Statistics Division based here in the Asia-Pacific region. The Philippine Statistical Authority is a true leader in our region. You've embraced already a modern legislative and institutional arrangement, not only for official statistics, but for civil registration, and more recently, the Philippines identity system. Your experiences are routinely sought out from across the region in areas as diverse as big data, vital statistics, economic statistics, disaster-related statistics. And we must thank you also for embracing the National SDG Tracker tool recently launched by SCAP. And for this, I'd like to personally thank you, Dr. Mapa, for giving freely not only of your time, but also the time of all of your staff there at the Philippine Statistical Authority to contribute to many events, particularly our Asia Pacific Stats Cafe series and the Asia Pacific Statistics Week, among others. The Philippine Statistical Authority, you're also influencing global agendas. And Dr. Mapa is a key member of the high-level group on partnerships, coordination, and capacity building for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is looking across all aspects of the 2030 Agenda, all of the Sustainable Development Goals, and how can we support governments to meet your commitments. I share all of this background for you because today's launch of Environmental Economic Accounting Project is another example not only of Dr. Mapa's leadership, but the leadership of the entire Philippine Statistics Authority and team, past and present, and their commitment to high quality official statistics for national policy priorities. And I'm really pleased that this project that's being launched today is focusing not only on technical challenges, but also institutional challenges, which I know many countries face in producing high quality and regular environmental economic accounts. In my own country of Australia, environmental economic accounts, they really did take a while to be accepted as a regular feature of an official statistics ecosystem. But today, like the Philippines, 30 years after we first started in Australia, today environmental economic accounts are used across many government policies for land, for energy, for water, and we've just heard there in the Philippines for timber, for minerals. And I know just recently here in Australia, the government announced a major investment in environmental economic accounts for oceans. So building on Philippines' long history of environmental accounting, dating back to 1991, as we hear, you really are one of the pioneers in the Asia-Pacific region. You've been an extremely active member of the UN Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting, and you've been extremely active in the development and piloting of a statistical framework for measuring the sustainability of tourism. So this role model that you play for other countries in the region and globally, and I'm confident that this new project launched today will lead to further evidence for policymakers, as well as further lessons that you can share with your friends and our friends across Asia, the Pacific and globally, particularly in this area of institutional arrangements, because this is where we're seeing countries really looking for new lessons. How can we embed new programs like environmental accounts into a regular and ongoing enduring feature of our official statistics ecosystems? Finally, I'd like to thank our good friends and colleagues at UNDES's Statistics Division for launching this project, not only in the Philippines, but in Asia and in Africa. It's through these projects that the UN development system builds capacity and really ensures that the world is transformed and no one and no country is left behind. The setting and the implementation of global statistical frameworks and standards and classifications would not be possible without the efforts of DESA Stats Division. And Ms. Alessandra Firi, who's here with us today, thank you for your commitment not only to global statistical standards, frameworks, classifications, to environmental accounting, but also your commitment throughout our region to advancing the use of environmental economic accounts for national policy priorities. So my congratulations again for the launch of today's project. I too wish you a best of luck, and I also please stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Van Halderen, for a very warm and informative message. Now, our project presenter for this morning is the Chief of Environmental Economic Accounts Section at the United Nations Statistics Division. She has led the program on environmental economic accounting at the UN for many years, and in particular, the elevation of the SEEA central framework to an international statistical standard, and more recently, the adoption of the SEEA ecosystem accounting. Prior to working at the United Nations, she has worked at Eurostat and at the World Bank. She holds a PhD in statistics from the University of Iowa. To present the environmental economic accounting for evidence-based policy in Africa and Asia from a global perspective with a link to the national implementation in the Philippines, let us welcome the Chief of Environmental Economic Accounts Section at UNSC, Ms. Alessandra Alfieri.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. And it's really my pleasure to be here to talk to you today and to be back in the Philippines, even though we are holding this meeting virtually. I really feel like I'm back at home. I have to say that the Philippines, I was part of the initial project in the Philippines in the 90s, and the PENRA project, and I am very much looking forward to working again in the Philippines. And I have to say that from the beginning, from the 90s, the ideas of institutionalization of this type of accounts, at that time was more central framework, was really at the heart of the work that we started. And I think that this showed a lot of leadership from the Philippines, and I think we will continue moving forward and show the Philippines as an example for the other countries in the region and in the world. As Gemma said, the Philippines have worked very closely, PSA in particular has worked very closely together with us in advancing the methodology and developing standard, and in particular the last Statistical Commission with the adoption of the SEEA ecosystem accounts. So I mean, we have a long history, and I'm looking forward now to the future. So I'll just make a short presentation on basically on the context of the project, give a little bit of a background on the SEEA. I think that you guys actually know quite a bit because you have been having quite a bit of experience in this space, but I think it's useful to have an understanding of what the SEEA is and the expectations from the project. So the discussion on nature and the importance of nature in the context, actually next slide. Yeah, in providing support to human well-being has been recognized for many years, and the discussions on how actually better reflect the nature into the statistical measurements, and in particular in the system of national accounts, has been going on for many years. So it's well known that basically indicators like GDP or unemployment rate or inflation do not really capture the full the economic contribution of nature, and they don't also capture the depletion and degradation of natural resources, so the impact of the economy on the environment. So this is a little bit the backdrop on which the discussion on developing a system of environmental economic accounts that actually goes beyond GDP and takes into account the nature in a systematic way, using the same concepts and classification used for economic statistics, is basically the background for this type of work. So next. So what basically the SEEA is an organizing framework of data that come from different sources, and these data are economic data as well as environmental data, because basically the SEEA sits at the intersection between the economy and the environment. So the strength of this system is integrating the data from, for example, from energy, air emission, agriculture, forestry, and now also for ecosystem, into a common framework which uses the same definition and classification. And the strength of this is really using the accounting structure to estimate or to basically use check and balances to look at the and improve on the data sources themselves. So next. So what has been the practice until very recently is that basically each agency has its own data, its own information for its own policy. The data usually compiled for monitoring and reporting, and not for statistical purposes. What the accounts actually does, the SEEA and the SNA, they take this basic data and integrate it using an accounting framework, and from which to derive indicators that then are consistent and comparable over time. And also this organization of the data also allows to bring using the same framework for both economic and environmental data, so they become fully comparable. So when we talk, for example, of indicators of natural resource efficiency, the numerator and denominator of this indicator come from a common framework, and so they are fully consistent and coherent over time. Next. So we have, so what the SEEA is, we have now two volumes. One volume is the SEEA Central Framework, which was adopted as a statistical standard in 2012 by the UN Statistical Commission, which is the highest body where all national statistical offices are represented. And the central framework takes a perspective of the economy. It basically measures how the economy uses the environment in terms of extraction of natural resources, uses within the economy, and then return back to the environment in terms of residuals like emissions into water, into air, or waste. And also looks at environmental assets in terms of individual assets. So for example, looks at timber, at water, and at fish. What we do with the ecosystem accounts is just basically the other side of the coin. So we look at the environment from the ecosystem perspective. The ecosystems are now seen as assets, and basically they represent a particular area. So we are not talking anymore of individual assets, but we are talking about, for example, we're not talking about timber, but we are talking about a forest. And the forest provides provisioning services like timber, but provides also additional services like regulating services like flood control or carbon sequestration. Same thing for the river. So the river is considered as an ecosystem asset which supplies water, but also provides other services like water purification, and same thing for the coast and ocean that provide fish, but also additional services like recreation. So basically these two systems are fully complementary, and they just present a different perspective. Next. So basically what we have in terms of statistical standard within the family, let's say, of systems of publication in the UN environment, we have the system of national accounts, which is the standard for the economy, from which all the economic indicators are derived, like GDP, investments and consumption and so on. And then we have on the environment side, we have the SEEA Central Framework and the SEEA Ecosystem Accounts. The SEEA Ecosystem Accounts was newly adopted just last March by the Statistical Commission. And this is kind of a very exciting new development, which is particularly relevant to respond to many questions, policy questions that are emerging, in particular in the context of climate change and biodiversity. So what we also have is we have a set of subsystems which are fully consistent, let's say, with the SEEA, but that they provide some kind of a bridge between the subject areas. For example, in the case of water, it provides terminology and an explanation which are close to the way the hydrologists measure things. So it's kind of a bridge between the specific subject matters and the accounting world. And we have subsystems for water, for energy, for agriculture, forestry and fishery, for measuring sustainability of tourism, ocean, and biodiversity. Those white ones are forthcoming, but hopefully they will be there soon. Next. So what basically the SNA and SEEA does is providing a single data system which combines data that come from different sources and different ministries and integrates them so that and can be used then for reporting. And this means that it facilitates and streamlines the reporting processes, and it provides consistent definitions and classification and special units. Next. So one of these examples is, for example, the SDGs. So since the SEEA is an integrated system, it supports very much the SDG philosophy and integrated agenda. And we have done a study that shows that about 40 indicators from for 9 SDGs can be derived directly from the SEEA. And in particular, if we are talking about the goal 14 and 15, most of the indicators are directly linked to the SEEA. In goal 15, one of the indicators, 15.9.1, is actually number of countries implementing the SEEA. And we actually run a global assessment every year to assess how many countries are compiling the SEEA and the progress made. Next. So this is the status of the implementation. We have run a global assessment in 2020, and we had about 89 countries that are compiling the SEEA. And this compilation, we divided, I mean, these different shades of blue represent different stages of implementation. For let's say one ad hoc pilot to a full regular compilation of the accounts. And we have, there are about 27 more countries that are planning to implement the SEEA. So that would, so there is an increase in demand, especially now for the ecosystem accounts, to implement the SEEA using also big data and Earth observation. Next. So the way we approach the national implementation is that we start with a national assessment or a national plan. So basically the national assessment identifies what the situation is in terms of policy demand and in terms of data. And the idea is to develop let's say, a medium-term national plan to see, to identify the priorities and the areas that need to be developed. And then we start to work on the priority accounts. So actually, usually phase 1 and phase 2 move in parallel. So while the national assessment is being done, we start working on compiling the priority accounts. And of course, when the compilation of the accounts is completed, the idea is also to understand how to actually introduce the production of these accounts as part of the regular production process. At the heart of all this work is, of course, training and capacity building, and I think communication and advocacy. One important point that has emerged also on past experiences is the engagement of the users community from the outset. So it is very important that, first of all, there is a regular communication between the data producers and users, and the objective of institutionalizing these accounts. So establishing some kind of a coordination mechanism, which actually you already have done in the Philippines. Next. So now if we move to the project, the objective of the project is to support countries in strengthening both the institutional and technical capacity for the development of an integrated system in support of sustainable development. We are working now with 5 countries, Kenya, Mozambique, and Senegal in Africa, and Malaysia and the Philippines in Asia. And the duration of the project is until mid-2023. We have 2 main outcomes here. The outcome 1 is to strengthen the institutional technical capacity of the national statistical offices to develop the SEEA in response to policy needs, and also to produce accounts as part of their regular statistical production process. And the outcome 2 is really to use these accounts and to institutionalize the use of the accounts for monitoring sustainable development and formulating integrated evidence-based policy. Next. So for the project in the Philippines, we have 3 activities. The first activity is the development of a national plan for advancing the environmental economic accounts. And that would entail basically 2 things. One is the assessment of statistical capacity for the implementation of the SEEA, and development of a roadmap for to using the SEEA for SDGs and other international initiatives. And here also what is particularly relevant, the SEEA has emerged to be very important for the compiling the indicators for the monitoring framework of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And there was a meeting, the recent meeting of the SABSTA has identified the role of national statistical offices in developing and implementing the monitoring framework. So I think there is a lot of potential here also to link it with the global biodiversity framework, which will be adopted in at the COP15 in China. And of course, this is all, the idea is really to have this stakeholder engagement and a strategy to continue to keep the stakeholders engaged in the process. The activity 2 would be the compilation of 1 or 2 priority accounts. So the idea is to start with land accounts in 2021 and then move to ecosystem extent accounts 2022. And here, I mean, of course, we will work very closely with PSA, but also the engagement with other stakeholders will be very important. And the third activities would be the organizations of workshop and training seminar. So we'll have a national and regional workshop and also technical training. Unfortunately, we will start, I think, with the virtual training because I think before the end of this year, I don't think it will be possible to do anything face-to-face. But then, I mean, as things evolve, then will be, I think it would be quite important to do some face-to-face training. Next. So the project sustainability, this is really at the heart of this, and we discussed this before, the importance of institutionalization of not only the production of the accounts, but also of the use of the accounts. The promotion of an interagency platforms for data sharing, but also for use of the results. We will continue the support, the international support, and we'll work also in very close collaboration with ESCAP. And the idea is to really mainstream the SEEA in the regular production process and try to elevate it really to the realm of official statistics and the use of the accounts in evidence-based. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alessandra Alfieri, for the very informative presentation about the SEEA. Our first session is about the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, SEEA, in the Philippines. Our presenter is currently the Assistant National Statistician handling the Macroeconomic Accounts Service of the Philippine Statistics Authority. In this position, she manages the generation, compilation, analysis, and dissemination of the macroeconomic statistics, which includes the economic accounts, as well as the satellite accounts on tourism, health, ocean, environmental, and agriculture. To discuss the environment and natural resources accounts history in the Philippines and the updates on environmental accounts currently undertaken by the PSA, and to introduce PSA's expectations from the project and how to build on previous work done on environmental economic accounting in the Philippines with a focus on land and ecosystems. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Assistant National Statistician Vivian Ilarina.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and good morning, everyone. I am pleased to present the implementation of the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEEA, in the Philippines. My presentation
happened?
My presentation is outlined as follows. First, I will define the specific roles of the Philippine Statistics Authority in support of the Philippine Seiya. Second, I will walk you through on the milestones of the Philippine Seiya. Third, what are the accomplishments of the Seiya in the Philippines and what are the current initiatives towards improving the Seiya? And finally, some key lessons learned on our journey on Seiya implementation in the Philippines. This slide will highlight on the roles of the Philippine Statistics Authority in support of the Seiya. The Republic Act 10625 of 2013 mandates the PSA to do the following in relation to the environmental and economic accounting. First, the PSA generates and maintains frameworks on social, economic, environmental accounts, including satellite accounts like the tourism, health, and ocean. The PSA coordinates the Philippine statistical system, and this is through the PSA board and the interagency committees, including the technical working groups and task forces. It also spearheads the development and maintenance of the indicators for sustainable development goals for the Agenda 2013. It formulates the Philippine Statistical Development Program. This serves as the blueprint of the Philippine Development Plan, which outlines the statistical activities and statistical programs of the government in support of the Philippine Development Plan and other frameworks like the Seiya. Also, a central statistical authority, the PSA conducts and generates data from censuses, surveys, and other administrative-based data like foreign trade statistics. It also administers the Philippine National Identification System and delivers its civil registration functions. On the next slide, I would like to highlight that the Philippine Environment and Natural Resources provides the mechanisms to support the goals in the Philippine Development Plan, its priorities, plans, and programs. Let me emphasize in particular the Chapter 20 of the PDP, and this concerns on ensuring ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment. Also, it supports, among others, the Ambition Natin 2040 or the country's long-term vision, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 10-point socio-economic agenda of the present administration, and this also supports other priorities under the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Sendai Framework. The Seiya serves as a tool to integrate and mainstream the environment in the government priorities, plans, and programs. Now on the next slide, you will see the milestones of the Philippines in implementing the environment and economic accounting. So I have identified the 7 milestones which paved the way for the Seiya implementation in the Philippines. I am looking at the milestones to represent the different projects that supports the implementation of the Seiya as a developmental initiatives for the country. First, we have the NRAP. This is the Environment and Natural Resources Accounting Project. Second, the Integrated Environmental Management for Sustainable Development, and we call this the ENRA-1. Then the third project is in the institutionalization of the Philippine Environment and Economic Natural Resources Accounting, and this we call the ENRA-2. Another milestone is that was the benchmark survey on the environmental protection expenditures, and this serves as a baseline in terms of the expenditures by the private corporations on their spending to improve the quality of the government. In 2020, we consider this also as a milestone because the Philippines hosted an international workshop on environment and natural resources accounting, which showcased the outputs of the Philippine Seiya. The recent ones, we have the Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services project, and the last one, until 2020, we have the project on the, as a locally funded project on the Philippine Economic Environment and Natural Resources, and this lasted from 2017 until last year, 2020. Now, moving on, then I would like to walk you through the major accomplishments of these identified projects in the Philippines. First, on the NRAP project, this is a USAID project, and this is under the NRAP and the DENR, or the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and this focuses on the capacity building of compilers of NRA and also the data producers. And the Environment and Natural Resources Accounts compilation, including the special studies for the development of database for environmental accounting. Now, the second project, which is NRA-1, this is a UNDP country program under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And here we use the UNSC as a framework. Within this project, we have the environment. We have the NRA component spearheaded by the National Statistical Coordination Board, and this also focuses on the building knowledge and capacities of the compilers of the Seiya and the data producers. Next slide. What are the accounts that were compiled under the NRAP and the NRA2? So we did first in the asset accounts of the resources and also the activity accounts. So under the asset accounts, we focused on the fishery, minerals, land and soil, forestry, and water. On the economic activity accounts, we had the transportation, mining, manufacturing, energy, agriculture, and this highlights on the effect of the economic activities to the environment like air, water, and land. So we call this the stock accounts and the flow accounts. Next slide. After 10 years, we decided that we can already institutionalize the environmental accounts in the Philippines, and we continue to generate the accounts both at the national level and at the regional level. So we started with to pilot the environmental accounts at the Cordillera Administrative Region, and they focused their compilation on asset accounts and economic activity accounts, and also on in Region 7 on asset accounts. We also tried to look at the pilot for the provincial level, and we targeted the province of Palawan, and we say, okay, it is feasible to do environmental accounts even at the province level. So these are some of the accomplishments we had in NRA 2. Now, aside from those accounts, of course, I already mentioned that we did the benchmark survey, and we have the international workshop. And most importantly, it was during this period of the project that we have executed the drafting of the Executive Order 406. This is to institutionalize the Philippine Environmental and Natural Resources Accounts. At the same time, we drafted also and approved the Joint Administrative Order of the Executive Order 406. And we continue to update and improve on the environmental accounts databases and expand on several environmental accounts, resources, and also the flow accounts. Now, most recently, we have also under the World Bank, the project on the Philippine Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, and with a duration from 2014 to April of 2017. And from here, we also established the Project Steering Committee on PINRA. Within this project, we compiled the mineral asset accounts, and this focuses on 4 metallic mining. Also, on the ecosystem accounts, we compiled the mangrove ecosystem on Laguna Lake, and also for Palawan. And we attempted to do the macroeconomic indicators to cover natural resources. Next slide will show you. Now, this is the locally funded project of the PSA, moving towards improving the economic and environmental natural resources, and we continue to compile and update the mineral asset accounts, energy, water, land, and this is something new for the PSA, the material flow accounts. Again, we continue to compile the regional environmental accounts, and we have, again, the Cordillera Administrative Region as the pioneer of environmental accounts in the region, and we have added Central Luzon as Ncaa regions to do the asset accounts, and just very recently, we also included the Northern Mindanao or Region 10. And then to improve on the statistics for environmental accounts, we piloted on Bicol, also in Cordillera Administrative Region. These are the 2 regions. In terms of the environmental accounts compiled for this project from 2014 to 2020, we did the land accounts, energy accounts, water accounts, and the greenhouse gas emission due to the Executive Order number 174, along with this, with the Commission on Climate Change, also the forest land accounts and agricultural land accounts. Okay, so in terms of the current initiatives that we are doing now in the Philippine Statistics Authority, we continue to update the mineral asset accounts, water accounts, energy asset accounts, and we also, along with this, to continue updating the compendium of the Philippine Environmental Statistics. But we are also expanding the compilation of the accounts to develop the land and timber asset accounts, ecosystem accounts, and the material flow accounts. So I wanted to highlight also that currently we have the pilot regions. We have the Cordillera Administrative Region focusing on minerals, land, water, including tourism. Also, Central Luzon region on land and timber, Caraga region on minerals, and Northern Mindanao region on water accounts. Next slide. Yeah, please continue. Okay. Also, we are regularly compiling the environmental account indicators for SDG, and out of the 155 Philippine SDG indicators, we have 39 indicators that are related to the environment and other indicators that are environment related. So we have like 16 indicators that we categorize under Tier 1, 8 under Tier 2, and 14 under Tier 3, and an additional on gas greenhouse emission as additional indicator to comprise the 39 SDG indicators. On the next slide, you will see these are the Tier 1 indicators, and under goal 0, for example, we have under goal 6, we have 5 indicators. Under goal 11, we have only 1 indicator. Goal 12, we have 1 indicator. And under goal 14, also 1 indicator. And under goal 15, we have 8 indicators. So this is the total of 16 indicators for the environment and environment-related indicators. In addition to this, we are also highlighting that we are also doing the sustainability on tourism, and this is linking with the Philippine tourism satellite accounts. And we continue to do the ocean economy accounts, and towards the new guidelines as done by the UNSC. And we are also involved with the greenhouse gas emission along with the CCC. We also continue to update climate change indicators, and just very recently we did the disaster expenditure accounts for the government, households, and the private corporations, and the material flow accounts for 2020. Next slides will show you that the efforts of the Philippine Statistics Authority is to communicate on environmental and natural resources accounts. We continue to communicate them through the NRA publications. And these are some of the sample publications that we have released. We have this as hard copies and also in our websites. These are all the publications at the national level, and we have also our publications at the regional level for the Cordillera Administrative Region, for Caraga Region, for the Central Luzon Region, and upcoming we have the Region 10 water accounts. We continue to communicate to our users through the infographics and social cards. These are all done on a regular basis. Every time we had the dissemination of our outputs on environmental accounts. And then this is something that we put on in our website and even in the social media. Yeah, we continue also to participate at the global level in the Committee of Experts on Environmental and Economic Accounting, experts on environmental statistics. We're also a member on the Committee on Tourism Statistics and Tourism Satellite Accounts, the UNWT Working Group on Measuring Sustainability of Tourism, and participating also in the United Nations Expert Advisory Group on the System of National Accounts. At the regional level, we are part of the Technical Working Group on Disaster Statistics for Asia and the Pacific, and also ASEAN Technical Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals, and we are participating also in the UNDP Biofin for the Philippines. At the national level, for the Philippines, we have established Environment and Natural Resources Accounts and Statistics Interagency Committee. And we have under the IAC, we have a task force on national resource accounting, natural resource accounting, technical working group on disaster statistics, Technical Working Group on Mineral Statistics, and the Technical Working Group on Water Statistics. Okay, I think this is the last sections that I have. We have identified some key lessons learned. Of course, we have a lot of them, but I'm just focusing on two areas. First, the compilation of environment and natural resources accounts needs strong and sustained partnership with institutions for data support and the uses of these accounts. So there is really a need to support, to build knowledge and capacities to generate environmental and natural resources data and to do the environmental accounts. As we all know, compilation of the environmental accounts and data takes a longer time. And also we need to support the understanding of the accounts and how to use these accounts for policy development. The second one is communication is very important, and these are very essential for the compilation of the environmental accounts. And we should need to recognize and strategize how to really communicate the accounts for the different target audiences. These audiences may be the general public and specific users, most particularly the producers and users of the accounts, scientists and economists. And also, as we have been doing in the PSA, we could continue to communicate, popularize our accounts. When we do the dissemination, we go beyond tabular presentations. That is to use the visuals, which can also extend for the analysis of the accounts. So thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation on the environmental accounts of the Philippines, ANS Ilarina. Now, at this juncture, we will now proceed to the session 2 of our program. We will talk about how environmental economic accounting is linked to related policy needs and priorities of the Philippines. To introduce our panelists and to serve as moderator to our panel discussion, let us welcome the Director of the International Cooperation Unit of the Philippine Statistics Authority, Director Benjamin Arsenio Navarro.
In this session, our panelists will focus their presentations on how the system of environmental economic accounting links to related policy needs and priorities in the Philippines by answering 3 questions. First, what are your initiatives on environmental concerns towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs? Second, what are your thoughts and advice on the plan of crafting the roadmap for the development of environmental accounts for the SDGs? And third, how would your institutions support this initiative? Our panelists will be given 10 minutes each to deliver their respective presentations. We will entertain questions afterwards. Our first panelist for today's forum is Ms. Susan B. Villar. Ms. Villar was designated to lead the Statistics and Data Resource Management Division of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or the DENR, in the mid-2019. She had previously worked with various undersecretaries of the DENR, where she gained insights on the operation of the department, environmental policy and planning, operation, enforcement, monitoring and evaluation, and international agreements and coordination. She has since put both experience and know-how to steer her division towards a broader appreciation of its function as the knowledge arm of the Knowledge and Information System Service. May I now call on Ms. Susan Villar for her presentation.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. But anyway, I would like to apologize I hope I'm coming in clear. I would like to apologize that Undersecretary Leones is not able to be with us today. We had a lot of commitments this day, so he asked me to send this message and to represent him in this event. So to answer the 3 questions that were asked, I would like to present to you how the DNR is taking stock of its operation, as well as how we could move forward with this project and with this new development with the adoption of the Seiya. So we call this retooling the DNR with Ncaa and Seiya. So how do we deal with the SDGs? You know, the DNR, as we know, it has the sole mandate to protect and conserve the Philippines' environment and natural resources. It is already in the mandate of the DNR. So suffice it to say that whatever comes out in the SDGs, the word sustainable itself is synonymous to DNR. But in any case, there are 4 goals in the SDGs which are directly being affecting both policies, implementation, and the whole scope of operation of our offices. So these 4 goals are goal number 6 on clean water and sanitation, and that is directly being implemented by our NWRB, our attached agencies responsible for water distribution, as well as the Forest Management Bureau and other agencies of the DNR. So the Forest Management Bureau is responsible for watershed protection and development, characterization of the watershed, as well as reforestation activities, so that we shall have sufficient and sustainable water sources. Goal number 13 is climate action. We have actually a climate change service, and we are working with the CCC in everything about climate change. And right now we are going to be establishing the climate information system so that we would be able to take stock of our activities and our goals on climate change. Goal number 14 is life below water. So all of this were already discussed by ASEC Ilarina, but let me just say that Biodiversity Management Bureau is in full command of this objective. So in addition, we have also Laguna Lake Development Authority. So we have the protection of watershed and the protection of our wetlands. If you would look at my picture, the background picture, that is Agusan Mars, one of the biggest wetlands in the Philippines. And just imagine what kind of goals we can set with Agusan Mars as well as Ligoasan Mars in Mindanao, considering this goal number 14. Goal number 15 on life on land is, of course, one of the activities and targets of Forest Management Bureau, including the BMB. And I couldn't just enumerate all our projects with regards to life on land as well as the other goals. Now, this is not just the goal. This is just those goals that we have direct hand in terms of policy and information. Of course, EMB is also concerned with sustainable cities, concerned with consumption, as well as clean energy. And we are also, in our advocacy at the DNR, we also take into consideration all the other goals in the 17 list of goals as advocated by the UN. So that is for our question number 1. How do we see the DNR with regards to its programs and projects and pertaining to the Sustainable Development Goals? For question number 2, Next slide, please. Okay, how do we view the Ncaa roadmap? As mentioned kanina by ASEC Ilarina, DNR and NEDA and PSA has been working and discussing and making collaborative strategies to bring the Ncaa account roadmap to the mainstream of government plans and programs. It should give us the picture of the cost and benefit of projects so that we can have better choices by valuing the project not only in terms of economic gains, but also in its contribution to or reduction of environmental benefits, as well as impacts to attainment of goals of the SDGs. So to cite some example, the contribution of the projects to the environment, such as carbon sequestration and the values of additional NGP sites, as well as contribution to food security. Flood mitigation value of preventing soil erosion and conservation of wetland ecosystems to ensure that those unique ecosystems will be able to sustain life as well as provide the kind of services that are indicated in the SDGs, such as clean water, food security, and others. The value of support to wildlife population. By doing so, we shall be providing food and habitat to our ecosystem. So this is true not only in the terrestrial ecosystem, but as well as in marine ecosystem. This would take collaboration in the government and cooperation of other sectors. The DNR recognizes that it will take a lot of collaboration, including with the private sector, since a lot of developments are spearheaded by our private sectors. Next slide, please. DNR supports to Ncaa and Seiya. There are several ways to approach valuation and assessment of economic and ecosystem costs and benefits, depending on the perspective and goals, whether our goal is to put up cell sites or to construct roads or to just build housing for our communities. So there are a lot of perspectives that we can consider. Hopefully, a system of prioritization of the more critical information, such as values related to climate change or biodiversity conservation, and others that can impact the SDGs will be established in the short run so that the Ncaa and Seiya application can proceed. So we really need to collaborate with all the agencies in order to establish what do we really want to do and what are our objectives. The DNR would continue to support this by retooling its planning and data management units with capacity development and appropriate policies and public engagement as may be necessary. Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, let me read to you the DNR mandate. This is our mandate. The department is the primary agency responsible for the conservation, management, development, and proper use of the country's environment and natural resources, specifically forest and grazing lands, mineral resources, including those in reservations and watershed areas, and lands of the public domain, as well as the licensing and regulation of all natural resources as may be provided by law in order to ensure equitable sharing of the benefits derived therefrom for the welfare of the present and future generations of Filipinos. The last line pertains to exactly sustainability of our environment and natural resources and fully supports the SDGs. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Villar, for your presentation and for sharing the mandate of the DNR. Our second panelist returned to NEDA in 2012, deepened her understanding of the agriculture sector, and expanded her field of expertise to include work on the more sustainable management and use of natural resources and on the identification of adaptation and mitigation measures to enhance resilience to climate change and other natural disasters. Her transfer to the Regional Development Group made her work in agriculture and rural development doubly meaningful, especially with the country's goal of promoting more balanced growth across regions. Her work experience is an illustration of a complete cycle of policy research where the development reforms that are pushed are based on the results of policy studies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Mercedita Agkawili Zumbilya.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Benji. Can I have my slide, please? So I am back now to present more in more detail how the environment and economic accounting is linked to the plan strategies that we have developed. And thank you for this opportunity to do this. Our natural capital as an important lever in spurring a Philippine economy cannot be overemphasized. Central to economic growth is the need to continue improving ecological integrity and strengthening the resilience of resource-dependent communities. To achieve this, we need to enhance the capacity and quality of the environment to sustain ecosystem services that provide economic opportunities to sustain the livelihood for resource-dependent communities and enhance national and local capacities for climate and disaster risk reduction and management. However, as our natural capital are exponentially extracted, the declining stocks and degrading environmental conditions are inadvertently neglected. To ensure that development goals do not compromise ecological integrity, the principles of sustainable development have been strongly integrated in the national development planning processes. The updated Philippine Development Plan 2017-2022 in particular puts emphasis on ensuring ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment as one of the country's bedrock strategies to ensure a healthy and resilient Philippines by 2022. The government is thus committed to continue to intensify the protection, conservation, and rehabilitation of our natural resources, strengthen the compliance with environmental standards and safeguards on improving environmental quality, that's the third strategy, and expand sustainable economic opportunities from natural capital. Do you see the slide clearly? It's blurred on my part. Anyway.
Blurred.
Yeah, it's a little bit blurred.
Yeah, we can't even read it.
Yeah, I know. I was not given the right to share the screen, so I'm just depending on the secretariat to do it. But anyway, so also the core of the plans and of course the government's priorities is the upscaling of the natural capital accounting. These are among the cross-cutting strategies that you see at the bottom to ensure that the demand of growing population for ecosystems, goods, and services are met while ensuring their sustainability, not only for the present, but also for the future generations. In this regard, we strongly recognize the need to determine and account for the true economic value of our natural resources so that we can manage them and optimize their contribution in the development of a green and sustainable economy. Next slide, please. Okay, really good. The potential use of Ncaa in setting and prioritizing the SDG indicators and vice versa can be tapped by building knowledge, tools, and methods that will be used for policy making, planning, and investment decisions. In view of this, we welcome the development of environmental accounts for the SDGs. This is very timely since ongoing reforms focused on transparent and science-based decision-making while pursuing sustainable, inclusive, and resilient growth. In fact, the government recognizes that NCA will help on the following: guide the formulation of development plans and policies towards sustainable development. This is in regards to the use of balanced set of indicators for social, economic, and economic environment in planning, allowing choices that supports economic and social needs without compromising ecological integrity. The second would be to set statistical framework and standards for proper valuation of natural capital. It will be useful to bridge environmental and economic data in an estimation of the country's total wealth using an institutionalized system or framework for NCA. The third one is to facilitate informed decision-making of political leaders and local communities on development options and activities vis-a-vis their trade-offs. NCA will guide in weighing the gains and trade-offs of a development intervention using the sustainable development lens to properly manage the competing uses of our natural resources. And the fourth one would be to improve the reporting of the country's performance and monitoring of the SDG indicators. NCA allows for more systematic collection, monitoring, and reporting of data from both the national and local governments, including academic and research institutions. The indicators identified for the NCA will help update and improve the compilation of environmental and natural statistics or data following the Seiya framework in the context of the Philippines. And we have heard from ANS Villarina on how we are now proceeding really with our Seiya framework. The fourth slide, please. The Philippine Roadmap to institutionalize NCA, which was developed in 2017 through the World Bank funded Philippines Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, or the PhilWaves project, is currently being updated, first to revisit the linkages of the NCA activities and how each of the components supports integration of NCA into policy, planning, and investment decisions. And B, adopt clear institutional arrangement and updated policy instrument to enable its smooth implementation. The roadmap takes into account the country's experience and lessons learned since NCA was introduced as early as the 1990s, which we have seen a while ago. As such, instead of crafting another roadmap, this new initiative can help develop a guidance document on how to link environmental accounts and SDGs, which can be considered in the updating of the NCA institutionalization roadmap. We in Ncaa are committed to continue steering the implementation and provide the overall policy direction of the NCA in the Philippines. In partnership with the Philippine Statistics Authority, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we will ensure that the NCA activities are being updated, implemented, and hopefully institutionalized. The institutionalization of NCA is also one of the intermediate outcomes of the Philippine Action Plan for Sustainable Consumption and Production, or what we call PAP4SCP, a newest blueprint which intends to steer behavioral change among Filipinos to shift towards more sustainable and climate-smart practices and lifestyles. This collaborative effort between the Philippine Statistics Authority and the UN Statistics Division is indeed timely, as I have already mentioned a while ago, to help strengthen institutional capacity and environmental economic accounting that will make way for its eventual institutionalization to better inform policies and decisions to achieve greener and more sustainable growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Undersecretary Zumbilya, for your presentation. At this point, allow me to introduce our third and last presenter for this session, Dr. Jem B. Castillo. Dr. Castillo is currently the chairman of the board and president of the Resources, Economics, and Environment Center for Studies, or REECS. He's also the president of the Resources and Environmental Economics Foundation of the Philippines, or REEP, and the national director of the Economy and Environment Group Philippines, or EEGP. These organizations are all committed to address environmental concerns in pursuit of sustainable growth and development. In addition, he became the deputy project leader of the recent ADB-funded project on nature-based approaches for climate change and disaster risk management. He also served as one of the national consultants in the implementation of the Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, or WAVES, a global partnership led by the World Bank from 2013 to 2017. He has made invaluable contributions in the fields of research, education, and consultancy on the system of environmental economic accounting. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jem B. Castillo.
Thank you, Dr. Benji, for that introduction. And it is an honor for me as president and chairman of the board of REECS to be part of this high-level launching of the UNSD Environment Economic Accounts Project policy related to in the Philippines and in Asia. And I'm presenting this in the perspective of a non-government organization. And so that means I will have a different view of how we are to implement the project. And I also titled my presentation as Environmental Economic Accounts in the 4IR or 5IR. I hope that we all will become familiar with this. 4IR means Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Fifth Industrial Revolution. And it has implications in terms of our development of accounts. Can you please go to the next slide? I have only 3 slides as given guidance. To answer the first question is this first slide on the initiatives on environment concerns related to the SDGs. And so I have to look at it from a perspective of what are the SDGs and what do we want the SDGs for. Of course, one of the primary concern is monitoring and achieving SDG goals. And so we're talking about monitoring and as well as developing SDG implementation strategies, meaning how do we achieve the SDG goals? And I'm still looking at it from a perspective or a view that we are now on the 4th and 5th industrial revolution. So I have that left panel to show that our tools, methods, and processes will have to be adapted to the current situation. And looking at it from a perspective that if we're going to achieve the SDGs, and as you will note, SDGs have interrelationships and interdependencies and trade-offs. 17 of them, some of them are interrelated, some have interdependencies, but there are also possible trade-offs. And with that, there's really a need for us to develop tools, methods, and processes. And that's in fact what the role of REECS, REEP, and EEG are. So in terms of integrating, developing integration or integrated information system, with really basically saying that if you want to achieve the SDGs with its interrelationship and interdependencies, we have to really link socioeconomic information, biophysical information, and geophysical information, and that we are not operating in a silo. And that we're talking about that because right now our focus is basically asking the question. Right now we are talking about environmental accounts. And the other thing that we wanted to also discuss is natural capital accounting. So what are the roles of these natural capital accounts and environmental accounts in SDG achievement? We're thinking we should be identifying and defining indicators. And that was already mentioned by ANS Vivian, that the link to these environmental accounts and natural capital accounts is the indicators. How do we arrive at these indicators? So that's the role and the importance of this developing the accounts. beyond developing the accounts, really we have to be thinking about using these accounts and indicators in terms of providing evidence-based policy support, and at the same time doing policy analysis. So we use such tools as benefit cost analysis, multi-criteria analysis, risk assessment, impact evaluation, input-output analysis, and so on. And along with that, we really have to do some modeling. I mentioned fourth and fifth industrial revolution because that is something that if we want to have an updated and over time useful information, there's really a need for us to update our tools. And so from the projects that RICS had in NRAP and the economics of ecosystem and biodiversity country study, and from our field waves experience, although we are not the company that implemented waves, it was World Bank and us, Dr. Ann and myself, as engaged in this, and Dr. Arsenas. But our experiences in these projects really lead us to think about how best to sustain the development of the accounts. So right now, in our engagement under the USAID SEEA project, or we call it the Sustainable Interventions for Biodiversity, Oceans, and Landscapes, we're trying to put in innovations that will really improve and sustain the development of the accounts, both at the site level and at the national level. And coupled with that, or along with that, is basically really, we wanted to have a sustained ANRA or natural resource accounting capacity building, not only for different priorities, but as well at all the different SDGs. The role of REAP, especially, is basically conducting research, training, conferences, and meetings. And as earlier mentioned, it is important that results of accounts and analysis of accounts are communicated. And we use REAP as a venue and a forum for doing this. And as you will recognize, when we think of accounting, we now realize that it's not just a work of one discipline. We now realize it's not just work of one agency or one institution, but it is now become really a multidisciplinary and also transdisciplinary. So we're dealing with issues that cannot be solved by just one agency, but we're dealing with issues that needs interaction and participation by a number of institutions, both private and public. And so if I'm going to our next slide, these are our recommendations for the development of an environmental and accounts roadmap as answering the second question. So let me detail, these are all in bullets, but in our experiences in the past in NRAP and in TEEB and in WAVES, the more important here is the timeliness of environmental information, timeliness of the accounts and its content. We're not just basically saying that we provide environmental statistics, basically very important. And I truly appreciate the developments that PSA had in terms of developing the statistics. We need to convert them into accounts and we need to convert them into indicators, but we need to have them really updated so that we're providing information available to decision makers in time to be capable of influencing their decisions. This is based on our experiences in implementing projects. And we want to think of it like it's not just for a national level policymaking, it has to be also dealt with at the local level. So for instance, we were thinking about localized sustainable consumption and production accounts, not only at the national level, but the provincial level, because this is where we are dealing with, especially if we're thinking about really improving the natural capital in these provinces. And then if we're going in the direction of really autonomous policy making and decision making and allocation at the local level. Second, our experiences have led us to realize that many of our projects have been ad hoc, that after its implementation, it is difficult to sustain results. So we need to have long-term collaborative projects among the academic, scientific, and R&D communities. I was scanning through the participants for this launching, and I realized I could not see the Department of Science and Technology. And of course, we have the DNRs, the data generators and providers, but there's really a need to have a sort of a collaborative partnership, not only with key agencies, but as well different institutions, even academic institutions who have the analytic capacities to really consolidate all the information provided from the different statistics and accounts. It should be sustained over a long period instead of just ad hoc, donor-dependent, short-term projects. So we should think of it as we develop that roadmap to environmental accounts. Partnership programs. It's no longer just the national government agencies. It should also really include regional government institutions, regional academic institutions, and private organizations like us and other organizations that not only RIGS. But really now there is really a need for us to really bring that together, partnering like academic institutions who have the analytic and technical capabilities, partnering with national government agencies, and regional institutions who are actually sort of at the height of their consolidation of accounts at the regional level. Third is that we really need to regionalize, and I really appreciate that we have reports from ANS Vivian about regional accounts, and we need to improve also their capacity. Right now we are dealing with, most of the accounts are in the central framework, and there is always that demand for developing capacity in terms of ecosystem accounting. Ecosystem accounting is a newer standard that was only adopted last March, as already reported earlier by Alessandra. But there is limited capacity at the regional level. So we want to regionalize capacity building, organizing experts groups at the regions. And that is what the EEG Philippines, and is already starting at this point with support from the Swedish International Development Agency. And we need to do regular trainings, developing tools, and especially establishing academic centers of excellence in environmental accounts that link to the data generators and providers. So we're thinking about DENR and academic institutions working together, data analytics, data generation, and compilation of the accounts through the PSA, both at the regional and the national level. Also, we need to have integration tools and methods. I mentioned earlier the economy and environment modeling. A lot of these really, if we are talking about trade-off analysis, benefit cost analysis, risk assessment, this will need really integration of socioeconomic data, geographic or geospatial data, environmental data, biological and biophysical information, using such tools that's already being popularized in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So when you talk about Fourth Industrial Revolution, these are concepts like Internet of Things, blockchain, I don't know if you are familiar with it, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and neural networks. I thought we were only in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but I found out yesterday that we are actually already in the Fifth Industrial Revolution, which is talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And one of the concerns actually in terms of the development of the accounts is once the funds are from donor organizations are exhausted because the project is completed, we don't have funding for our development of the accounts. So perhaps we should think about alternative resource generation and financing, like designating certain revenue, income, charges, or fees from environment for sustained development of environment economic accounts to supplement GAA budget allocation. I know that I am not able to exhaust, but from the perspective of really putting this into the ground, we really need to have these kinds of key important recommendations. Lastly, so the next question is actually, what can our organization contribute? Right now, really, the primary that we can provide at this point is continuing capacity building. We want to enhance the capacity of Philippine researchers. Turns out that even academic institutions have limited capacity in terms of natural capital accounting, ecosystem accounting. So we want to have these centers. So aside from their expertise in analytics, we also really have to let them experience what it is to develop natural capital accounts, environmental accounts, and ecosystem accounts. So we need to have educators, decision makers, and managers on data generation, integration and application to SDG policies and processes. So we want support, we can support in terms of establishing regional centers of excellence in accounts development through academic institutions. We can also support in terms of developing environmental accounts and policy evaluation. Our group's strength is really a lot in terms of doing policy evaluation and also policy analysis post and ex post and ex ante analysis. But of course, there are. And so we're basically, our organization is basically a group that is composed of different experts from different organizations and academic institutions. The third is our partnership. We engage with multidisciplinary researchers, educators, and decision makers. And we're really focusing on a transdisciplinary approach to addressing issues in terms of the SDGs. And last but not the least, it's already been emphasized by previous presentations. We need to improve science communication. That's a big lesson that we have in our previous projects. How do we improve the capacity of account providers, developers to communicate with sound advice to policymakers that will catch their attention? Right now, we have that being introduced at the ASEAN region level, but we are developing this scheme and capacity for science communication at the national level in the Philippines. I think that ends my presentation, and I hope that I'm able to clarify. Thank you very much.
And at this point, I would also like to thank all our panelists for your very interesting and substantial presentations. Before the open forum, allow me to provide a recap of the three presentations. In the first presentation, Ms. Villar discussed the link between the SDGs and the DNR mandate. She elaborated on the collaborative strategies of the DNR and NEDA with the PSA to bring the natural capital account roadmap to the mainstream of government plans and programs. She expressed her assurance that the DNR would continue to support Ncaa and Seiya by retooling its planning and data management units with capacity development and appropriate policies and public engagement. For the second presentation, Yusek Sumbilla underscored the government's commitment in ensuring ecological integrity and a clean and healthy environment as one of the country's bedrock strategies to ensure a healthy and resilient Philippines by 2022 through the updated Philippine Development Plan. She discussed the potential use of Ncaa in setting and prioritizing SDG indicators. In particular, she mentioned that the Ncaa could serve as a guide in the formulation of development plans and policies toward sustainable development. The Ncaa could also serve as a set of statistical framework and standards for proper valuation of natural capital. Moreover, it could help facilitate informed decision-making of political leaders and local communities on development options vis-a-vis trade-offs, and it would allow for the improvement of the country's reporting performance and monitoring of SDG indicators. She ended her presentation with an assurance of the continued commitment of NEDA in steering both the implementation and provision of the overall policy direction of Ncaa activities in the Philippines in partnership with the PSA and DNR towards the institutionalization of Ncaa. And finally, for the last presentation by Dr. Castillo, he highlighted the respective initiatives of RICS, RIP, and EEG Philippines on the environmental concerns of the SDGs. He mentioned the various projects, capacity building activities, research and training, as well as the promotion of regional collaboration to address global and local economic environmental challenges. As you will recall, he offered key recommendations for the development of the environmental accounts roadmap. To cite a few, he stressed on the need for the timeliness of environment information accounts and content. He also spoke about the need for long-term collaborative projects as well as partnership programs, not only within the key agencies, but also with other stakeholders such as the private sector. He also mentioned about the need for regionalized capacity building, the integration of tools and methods, and he also spoke at length about the need to modernize for both the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions. And finally, for sustainability, he also talked about the need for alternative resource generation and financing. In terms of the support for the development of environmental economic accounts, Dr. Castillo also mentioned that RICS, RIP, and EEG Philippines are committed to continuing capacity building activities, developing environmental accounts and policy evaluation, and promoting partnership and improvement through scientific communication. So with this, let us now open the floor for questions and comments from the participants. We invite our online participants to type in your questions in the chat box. Kindly indicate to whom you would like to address your respective question. Thank you.
Sa panelist lang. Kung panelist lang. Or
Sa panelist lang.
questions about sub-panelist.
Okay, so again, we invite everyone for any questions for the three panelists. Okay, so we have a question here for NEDA, PSA, and Dr. Jem. How are we expecting EMB and the EIA system to evolve to take into account these accounts? So we now open the floor for any for the replies of the representatives from NEDA, PSA, and Dr. Jem.
Hindi ko mabasa. Pakisulat.
Dr. Mercy, kayong nauna daw sa listahan, kaya pwede kayo mag-respond.
Thank you.
I'm not really sure what the question means. Can Miss Paz Luna explain what she means? How EMB is the one in DNR? Is that what you mean? What is EMB?
May we hear, please, from Ms. Luna to elaborate?
Yes, the EIA system is the one that gives go signals to large projects, especially extractive as well as the large infrastructure projects. The signal they give is called the environmental compliance certificate. And frankly, my concern, which I expressed before, I think to a number of the experts as well, is that we don't have an accounting of the gravel and sand, legal gravel and sand resources as against the large infrastructure projects. So in housekeeping systems, we don't have an accounting of how much we can extract in gravel and sand in order to support our infrastructure for public infrastructure, and even worse for private infrastructure altogether. So the EIA system is key to all of that because it should look at the sources of materials as well as the alternatives to these projects. Currently, it doesn't do so, but I'm hoping the system of natural capital accounting can help the EMB do that. So I'm asking whether you think that can be possible.
Susan,
I can answer. I can answer part. Dr. Yes, that has been actually quite I would say an extended discussions among us, and I've heard that from Attorney Ipat. It's true indeed. Our EIA system needs to have some enhancement and introduce tools in terms of ecosystems accounting by putting in place a section or tools and methods that those who are conducting EIAs should consider measuring impacts of abiotic resources such as minerals, gravels, and sand on the renewable resources such as natural capital, because essentially you have a trade-off between extraction of such abiotic resources on renewable resources, and in fact also impact on our water system. So apart from introducing natural capital accounting and ecosystem accounting in the EIA, so we can have details, we want to also improve on the benefit cost analysis component of the EIA. So we wanted to come up with a good measure in terms of the trade-off between extracting biotic resources versus maintaining biodiversity resources. And I agree that there should be some input in terms of the tools of ecosystem accounting introduced into the EIA system, which is already an existing law in the Philippines.
Thanks very much, Dr. Jem. If I may mention, we also mentioned EIA in the bill for the Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Accounting System Act. And I'm really hoping NEDA and PSA can backstop us for that in terms of pushing it in Congress. Thank you very much.
USEC, Zambilla, and Dr. Castillo, no, for your responses. Can we now move on to the next? We took note that there are some other questions from the...
Director Benji, merong nag-raise si Susan ng hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think the PSA and DNR should really be, talking about this.
Okay. Can we... Would Ms. Villar like to add?
Yeah, thank you very much, Director Benji. Thank you, USEC IPAT. Yeah, I remember USEC as my USEC at the DNR. And thank you for bringing that up. EIA system was approved and developed way back in 1977. And it was issued through PD, if I'm not mistaken, 1151, I think, yeah. So it's a system that was developed way before the Ncaa and the Seiya. So since this is an impact scoping, it doesn't account naturally for accounting of ecosystem benefits as well as services. So I think it's a very good idea to look at the EIA system so that we can integrate really the cost of a project in terms of its services and the loss of biodiversity, for example, not only on mitigating that effect, or recovering that effect, or letting the developer to do some projects or activities that will try to replicate the losses that we are going to suffer because of a certain project. So it doesn't really account for ecosystem services in a way that we are seeing it now. But if like we were saying at the DNR, it's the Ncaa and the Seiya will entail a lot of policy shift. So if we are going to engage in Seiya and Ncaa, we have to account for those losses in terms of ecosystem services. And one of those things that impact the ecosystem is development project, and that is made possible through the use of the EIA scoping system. So like I said, usually EIA system would examine the impact, but not necessarily the ecosystem cost. So it's going to take a lot of policy change in order to account for that change. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, USEC IPAT.
Okay, Ms. Villar, no, for those insights. Okay, can we now move on to the other questions, except if anything else to add before we move on from any of the panelists? If none, may I now call
quick response. There is now an existing methodology actually for the private sector that we can actually take a look, which is what they call the impact and dependency assessment. It's already being established, and it's being tested through the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I think the Natural Capital Protocol as well. So there is that already methodology that we can take a look that can be introduced in the EIA. Thank you.
Celia, no? So we have taken note of that, okay, which we will also consider here at the PSA. Okay, let us now hear from ANS Vivian.
Yes, Madam Luna. Yes.
Yes, Ms. Luna.
Okay. The EMB and the EIA systems are, I'm sure, very important, and we will really consider them in our next initiatives in our compilation of the ecosystem. And we have not yet really focused on this, but in the framework of the ecosystem, this is possibly one of the priorities that we can go into. And this will also, this is one way to really identify some of the gaps in the ecosystem accounts. Thank you.
Okay, I took note that Ms. Alessandra is raising her hand. Would you like to comment on the discussion?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of points on the relationship between environmental impact assessments and maybe cost benefits analysis and the SEEA. So I think that the SEEA can provide us input in the environmental impact assessment, because it would provide the basic data to basically do the modeling and to do the analysis that is needed for the environmental impact assessment. And for the relationship with the private sector, I also would like to note that at the global level, there is an initiative under the EU Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting to establish a group to start working towards harmonization between the business accounting and the SEEA. There are a lot of initiatives in the private sectors going on, but there is also a lot of interest on moving towards standardization. And to also work closely with the statistical community, which I would say building this relationship between public and private was considered very important. in the public side, let's say we already have macro standard like the SEEA, but in the business side, they don't. So they would like to follow a little bit the track that we have been following on that. And also as part of this, this group, the idea is to foster collaboration between the businesses and the statistical offices in the sense of improving the data that the statistical offices compiles and disseminated in a way that it's useful for business. A lot of data is already compiled, but the businesses are not really using it. So it's basically better understand the needs for business as one of the users of these accounts, and how can the statistical offices better disseminate the data that they have. And I mean, and this idea also leading towards standardization, the idea is that then also the statistical offices will have data that are ready to compile the accounts in a much more, I mean, they would get better data from the businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. May I now call on Mr. Raimundo Talento? So he was, you're raising your hand, sir.
Hindi ka namin marinig, Ray. Ayun.
Okay.
Probably a problem with his audio.
May we request if you can kindly type in your question in the chat box since we cannot hear you right now. Thank you.
Move to another question.
Okay, Mr. Raimundo, I'm sorry we cannot hear you. May we request you to use the chat box for your question. Okay, while we're waiting for that question.
Last question, Vince.
Yes, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. May we hear from Attorney Mactahar Manulon? I see that you are raising your hand. Sir?
Last na yun, last na.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please. RDMAC.
Lagay ko dito ang problema.
Hear you. May we request that you use the chat box, please?
Director Benji?
Yes, you said?
Yeah, I would just like to recognize the comment of Doc Marian de los Angeles in the chat box. And indeed, you know, doing this is really a whole of society approach. There are a lot of already projects that have been going, but these are really sporadic, you know, they are, you know, ang dami na yun eh. Sana, you know, we could all consolidate the data, the information that has been, you know, generated from all of these projects so that, you know, we can really see how we are going to be moving forward in terms of this, because we recognize, increasingly recognize the really need for, you know, for doing this environmental accounting. These are finite resources that we really need to be, you know, to be careful about and to take care and to manage properly. So we hope, you know, we are going to be able to, you know, to really do that, you know, to mine already those projects, those informations, those data that have been generated by several projects, you know, across the country. Thanks, Marian, for these comments, and we'll continue to be working with you and with your colleagues on this particular aspect. Thank you, Director Benji.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can we now hear from if the technical problem has been resolved, may we hear from either Mr. Ray Talento or from Attorney Mac?
Director Benji, there's a question by Aldrin.
Okay, thank you, Yusek, please.
Yeah, this is regarding the SDG targets relating to environment, economy, so that we may know if you're on track. Yes, I think there are targets. Not all the targets that have been that has been provided by the SDGs, but I think PSA was able to identify key ones that we can really monitor. Measure, to help us measure how we are doing with regards to some of the SDG goals. And I think, may I invite PSA to mention some of those targets? I cannot recall them on top of my mind right now, but they do have. We could provide you with the targets later on, probably, or PSA could provide you with the targets later on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yusek. Unfortunately, we can provide that to Aldrin. However, I'm afraid that we've run out of time. We still have one more session. So again, my apologies to those who were not able to raise their questions. But feel free to forward your questions to the Secretariat, and we will respond appropriately. So with that, may I now call on Ms. Nicole.
Yung last na question, yung second question niya, Director Benji, with regards to connecting the Seiya, results of the Seiya to the GDP, we are in the process of doing that. Hopefully, we could really do that. We wanted to do it under waves, but we don't have still enough data, I think. ANS Villarina will be able to provide you a more concrete explanation. Explanation on why we cannot still connect this with the GDP. Corrected GDP based on the results of Seiya, or National Capital Accounting. Thank you. Just for the information for the information, everyone. We are really in that process, in the move, to really come up with this and correct our GDP or GRDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek. So before we end this, I'll just call on ANS Vivian for her comment on this.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Actually, adjusting the GDP, this with the environment, using the environmental accounts, these are exactly the directions are moving forward that you wanted to do. But these things has already evolved, and we are moving towards like wealth accounting. This will generate adjusted macroeconomic indicators to integrate the environment into the economy. During the WAVES project, we have attempted to do this. We took into account of course, the produced assets, economic assets, the human resources, plus the resources, the natural capital resources. But during that time, we just limit ourselves on the mineral asset accounts, and we have yet a lot of things to do in terms of looking at the depletion or degradation of the resources. So possibly this can be programmed, and I'm sure we will be moving towards that to have a more comprehensive accounting of the asset account, so that at the end of the day, we will have adjusted macroeconomic indicators. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, ANS Vivian. And again, thank you to the three panelists, both for your presentations and for for your inputs during the Q&A. I now pass you on to Nicole.
Thank you very much, Director Benji, for that. And thank you again to all our panelists for fruitful discussion on our topic for today. Now, moving on, we have come to the end of our program. Our last session, Advancing the Agenda, discusses the project timelines and milestones, focusing on the immediate next steps and opportunities for interagency collaboration. The last session will be discussed by one of the most notable statisticians in the Philippine statistical system. She is a professor of statistics at the University of the Philippines School of Statistics and currently the vice president for planning and finance of the UP system. She was the national statistician from 2014 to 2019, heading the Philippine Statistics Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a warm welcome to Dr. Lisa Grace S. Bersales.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I would like to thank PSA and the UN Statistics Division for involving me in this very important initiative. So for this last session, I have actually prepared some slides. And as Nicole said, we're actually discussing moving forward, focusing on the project, on the initiative, making sure that collaborations and what the project aims to do will happen. So I just have some key points from session 1 and points from session 2 I integrated in my slide on moving forward. So, you know, I really appreciate the discussion of Alessandra, emphasizing to us that now we are working with issue of one environment, two perspectives. So in the past, we worked with central frameworks, focusing on, say, land, ocean, but now we're moving to ecosystem frameworks, looking at the and the integration of what were in the central framework before in the ecosystem framework. So this discussing moving to ecosystem frameworks, but never forgetting the central frameworks. And so Seiya has been identified as an integrated framework that may be used for the two pillars of the Sustainable Development Goals, economic and environment. So this is really where Seiya is very important as part of our move towards approaching the monitoring of Sustainable Development Goals in an integrated way, recognizing that many of the goals and indicators are on one. You either have synergy or you have trade-off. And as we have heard, economic and environment pillars in the Philippines, we've already heard that we are not starting from zero. We actually have been working on and what is good about what is happening in the Philippines is that it's not just one agency working on this area, it's various agencies. We have heard Ncaa as our lead in the Ncaa word as well with environmental areas. And we have heard PSA as the data and statistics support to the initiatives. On this initiative. So this initiative, as discussed by Alessandra, is environmental economic accounting for evidence-based.
Lisa, sorry, you're breaking up. Can you maybe turn off the video?
Oh, I'm very sorry. Let me turn off my video. Sorry. Let me just stop sharing for a while. Apology. So I'm discussing key points from session 1, and the presentation actually already shows you what I have been talking about in the past while I was breaking up. So I hope you don't mind. I'll just proceed with what I will just continue with what I was. So we're very happy that Philippines is part of this global initiative with PSA as the lead implementer in the country. And the project aims to strengthen institutional arrangements. They exist already. And so what we want to happen is strengthen. And as USEC Mercy said, some of the projects were done by various agencies. They have not been fully institutionalized as one integrated framework for everyone. And so what we want to do with this project is really come up with an integrated system, including data sharing with clear institutional arrangements. Of course, building capacity is part of it, and communicating results so that they're actually used, especially by policymakers, as emphasized Dr. Castillo. And so let me focus on moving forward. As mentioned by Alessandra, this is a 3-year initiative, but I will just focus on the first year. In my mind, a very good outcome of the first year this year will facilitate what happens in the coming 2 years. So what we want to come up is a national plan for Seiya implementation in the Philippines. And this includes assessment of efforts that have already been done in relation to Seiya. And we've heard already from our panelists what have been each agency has been doing. We also want to get guidance from everyone on what should be policy priorities, what are our priority interests, who would be our relevant stakeholders for inclusion in the discussions and the plan, and capabilities. We also want to come up with a detailed work program on advancing the Seiya. And with the national plan is an accompanying document, a roadmap, which will have clear data strategies, strategies on monitoring, which would include voluntary national reviews of SDGs, given that Seiya is a framework that can integrate the 2 pillars of SDGs, economic and environment. A monitoring framework that will also be for post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and continued institutional engagements, communication advocacy, and I added what I heard in session 2, public engagement, knowledge tools and methods, and capacity building, retooling some of knowledge of our technical and other staff. And for this year, land account, which has already been started by PSA, is a first initiative. But we really want, I go back to identification of policy priorities, country interests, relevant stakeholders, and capabilities for Seiya implementation. And with that, I came up with this slide where I don't know if we have time to get recommendations from our participants today. Maybe if you can quickly write in the chat box if there is no time for engagement. But what I heard is for accounts to prioritize land account, which PSA has started, and USEC Luna said sand and gravel. This is to facilitate or enhance EIA. And we need to do an assessment on what is already there. And there's a lot already there. We have the Ncaa roadmap, and we have, I think Congresswoman Legarda's bill, House Bill 9181, which is PENCAS, which is in Philippine Environment and Natural Accounting and System, and Natural Capital Accounting System, and documents of past projects and initiatives, the ones that were highlighted by Vivian, by ANS Vivian. She actually did already a quick assessment. And I listed in stakeholders that were mentioned by our panelists in session 2, as well as what I've read in the chat box. So we have, of course, NEDA, PSA, DNR, DOST, private sector, especially business, the political, our political luminaries, NGOs, academia, research and development institutions. We should definitely involve subnational, given that actually there are initiatives on Ncaa subnational, Ncaa subnational, and of course our development partners. So actually this is my last slide. Before I say see you in our consultation meetings and workshops, I appeal for all our participants here who have much to say to please say yes when we request for meetings and workshops with you. So thank you very much. I don't know if there is time for this, but maybe I would just like to request, please, if you can quickly answer in the chat box these questions that I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lisa Bersales, for that message. And I hope the participants answer the questions that you posed on your last slide. Now, that's it for our program this morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that this panel session has been informative and helpful to everyone and truly help solidify the way forward for the Seiya. Thank you very much to our guest speakers, panelists, and participants for your active participation. Again, I'm Nicole. Stay safe and mabuhay. I hope before everyone leaves, can we have the opportunity for a photograph, a group photograph? So if we can ask our participants to open their video camera so that we can screenshot and document this momentous occasion. So I hope everyone can open their cameras so our secretariat can take a photo. All right, I think we have 3 batches for this one. But yes, okay. I'll ask the secretariat now to take a screenshot. All right, let's put on our best smiles. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you. I think the rest of our group don't have their cameras, but thanks very much for participating and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Enes Dennis.
See you.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alessandra. Yusek,
Thank
Mercy.
you.
Hello.
See you.
Miss Susan.